Welcome back. Today we're going to tie my Conehead 10 at 2. This is a fly more so when I want to jig a fly for certain. This is one of the first ones that I'll go to. The Conehead version more so than the fish skull. It's a perfect jig pattern. You know, there's not a ton of bulk to it. It's a relatively slender pattern. And the Conehead with tungsten carries a little bit more weight, and it just seems like it cuts through the surface a little bit better. When we get closer to winter, and that's when I'm typically jigging flies, or if it's a bright sunny day, you know, I think that the fish are sitting down a little further in the water column, I'll go to this Conehead 10 at 2 a lot, just because, like I said, it dives down pretty good. I probably fish the fish skull version of it more so than I do the Conehead, just because I like moving them a little bit faster. I mean, you can still jerk strip this if you want to really rip something through the water. It's not so heavy because, like I said, it is a slender pattern. It doesn't carry a ton of bulk to it. It still skirts pretty good in the water, but if you let this go down, like if you let this drop, it'll get down pretty quick. But it's a relatively light pattern, minus the Conehead portion of it. So it's really top header. It's really front heavy, to where you'll see it. Like if you fish this in a yellow or a white, you'll see it. Like as soon as it hits the water, it's going south. So we'll go ahead and start on this one. This is an MFC 7050 size 4 for the back hook. And gel spun 100 as always. Let me make sure that we're clear in the back there, and then we'll go ahead and just put a thread base down. Get all of that set how we want it. Advance that a few thread wraps forward, and then I'm going to go with a Sunburst yellow for a tail. We're going to tie this, I didn't mention it. We're going to tie this one today in a copper olive and olive brown. There's a little bit of a mix of everything in this one. It's one of my favorite colors for this. My favorite though is still the original, the brown and yellowtail. But this one, it definitely has a good look to it. So I just want to measure this out, length of the hook right there. And like I said, this Sunburst yellow is just going to be like a little bit of something to break up the color a little bit. I don't think ever putting yellow in a fly is a bad thing, especially hunting brown trout. I don't know, I just like the way that it offsets the tail a little bit, keeps you away from a solid or continuous olive theme throughout. So now I'm going to take some holographic copper Flashabou. Just going to have 2 strands here. I'm going to double it up. Depending on the amount of flash you want, you can add or subtract. I'm going to set this on the top side of that Sunburst. And then right back over the top once again. And it's sitting, like I said, on the top portion of the Sunburst. I don't want it sitting so much laterally as it is more so on the top of it. That way when I put the tail in, it's going to be a little bit of an internal flash. And then to round out the tail, I just want to take a piece of olive brown, scalping olive, whatever they classify the color as, but it's not a straight olive, this is an olive brown from Hairline. I know some of them, they call them scalping olive, whatever it may be, but just an olive brown blood quill Marabou. and then this is going to go right over the top. I want this to be a little bit heavier than the yellow. So when I'm picking these out, I typically go a little sparse on the Sunburst, and then try and go a little heavier on the olive, but honestly it really doesn't matter one way or the other. And we'll get that set in place, and then we're going to go with the body material. We're going to tie that in before we advance to the front. This is a copper olive UV puller chenille. I just got done tying well over 100 of these. Not all the same color, but well over 100 of this pattern. So if I mess something up on this video, I think I'm going to retire from tying. Find something new to do. Alright, so now we're just running that forward. I don't want to run it the entire way. Leave about 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, whatever it may be. Somewhere in that ballpark in the front, because I want to tie in some rubber legs and an overwing as well. So then I just want to throw this in the cradle. We're going to make our body out of this. Just get a couple of wraps right through there to start. Anchor that in. 3 to 4 wraps. Anchor. All the way up to where we put our half hitch in. Get back there. Now I just want to tie that in, get that set in place, and then I'm going to go right over the top. Just clean that up a little bit, give me a nice clean platform to tie in these rubber legs. Everything's nice and even right there. I don't have a ton of bumps or anything. And then I'm going to go with some gold, amber, and black fly enhancer legs. And I'm going to do 2 in the back, 3 in the front, so I'm going to pick all of those out. While I have everything here with me, just go through and get these. There's my set of 2. There's my set of 3. Get the rest of those off to the side. Go ahead and tie in your legs. Just a figure 8 over the top of these. 1, 2. Manipulate the legs now that, you know, I mean, you still have loose wraps there, so you can manipulate your legs to where they're going to be. And then get a couple of wraps in the front of it and really pull down tight. It's going to sink that gel spun down into the legs. I got Marabou in my nose, and those things, they're not going anywhere. They're locked into place. So now I'm going to go with some olive brown, sculpin olive, whatever it may be, something to match the tail. This is Woolly Bugger Marabou, and I want to take a piece of this for my overwing. This piece looks pretty good, actually. I don't know. Yeah. I thought I was going to use the tips and everything, but it's a little webby up at the top. It's a little bit stubby, so I'm just going to pull this off to the side right here. I'm going to pull that off to the side. You can see we have a pretty good chunk of Marabou right there. Just going to pull that from the side. I'm going to bust those tips. And there's a couple, a little bit off. Right there. There we go. I'm going to bust those tips. I have that wet as it sits right now. I just want to measure this over the top. I want it going back into the tail section. So you can see if I draw a vertical line right there, it's going back past my tail. And I'm just going to dust this section off after I measured it out. And then tie that in place. Get some nice clean wraps over the top. really tighten down on that. I think I went over one of my rubber legs. I'm gonna have to see. Yep, I did. Got over one of my legs. There we go. Make sure that you don't trap any of those legs. We've got a nice clean head on this back hook. Get one more whip finish on this. Take your legs. I usually go right across from the center of this gold piece on the Renzetti, right on the gold arm right there, and that's my cut for the back half, because if you take these and fold them back, it's going to wind up going right into, I know it's probably tough to see, but there's the end of my rubber legs right about in the middle of my tail. That's right where I want those back ones. I don't want these back ones so long that they're sticking past my tail when it's when you're fishing this thing, because ultimately the water's going to force that stuff back. I want them to be almost lateral lines, and they go, like I said, almost right to the halfway point in my tail. Now I'm just going to take and color our thread up here, just touch that up. That's a tan, doesn't matter what color you use, something in the ballpark of the color that you're going with on that fly. We're going to take some 19 strand Beadalon, run that through there, kink that right in the center, and then I want to find a somewhat decent bead here. That one looks good. It's just a blue 6/0 bead. Well, there are beads all over the damn floor now. Should have just left it on the table, but there are beads everywhere. I'm sure the dogs will have fun with that shit. Anyhow, I'm gonna have a little mess to clean up after this video. That's a first. That's a first. All right. So for the Conehead on this one, I'm going to use a tungsten. Let me get that in the frame right there so it's you're able to read it. That's just a large black tungsten Conehead bead. If you want to, you can go with the brass, and then you can add a little bit of weight to it. Just kind of offsets it slightly. There we go. Get that set into place. And before I go tying that in, I got beads everywhere here. Falling all over the floor. Alright. Before I go tying this in, you can see how this is really spinning around there. It's going to go all over the place on you. What I typically do is I'll use just some lead wire, maybe like a 15 thousandths or something along those lines. That's typically what I use. 15 thousandths is probably a little bit on the small side, maybe a 20 thousandths, just about 5 or 6 wraps, and then force that into the cone. It'll set that in place for you. It'll secure it a lot better. What I'm gonna do with this is I'm going to take, this is just like this is a tungsten putty. I had no intention of ever buying this stuff. I had an order from Hairline that came through. Somehow this got sent in my order. I wasn't going to use it. I was going to send it back, because it's a little spendy, but the old chocolate dog, she wound up getting into a couple of packs of it and just having teeth marks and all sorts of stuff through it. So ultimately I wound up just keeping it. Actually found a really good use for it. This is great for if you're using, if you're tying like a bunch of scuds or something like that. Really good scud pattern. You're able to mold this, and I also found that it's really good for keeping your cone heads in place. And all I do is I just pick off a little bit of that right there, and I just work this right around. It adds a little bit of extra weight too, so if you really want something to dive for you, to really get down deep in the water, this is a good application for it. So it was kind of one of those things that happened by mistake, but it was also a kind of a blessing there that I found this stuff, because like I said, I wouldn't have ordered it otherwise. So like I said, all I do is I just pack that full, and it's pliable. You can mold this stuff. You can do whatever you need to do with it. But if I take and turn this around here, hopefully you'll be able to see. There we have it right there. That's where all that little tungsten putty is sitting, right in there. And it's a little bit heavy on the, I got a little bit heavy there, but I'm going to try and just work through that. Maybe pick some of that out. There we go. And I just work that right into, it's a little tacky, but it's really pliable, and it goes into that Conehead pretty well, and it sets everything in place. I've seen folks use like beads and everything. That gets really spendy doing that. I mean, I don't remember exactly what a pack of that putty costs, but I mean, you could probably do 200 flies with just that one little piece right there. It really goes that far. So I mean, it winds up being relatively inexpensive, probably even cheaper than the lead wire, to be honest. But all I'm gonna do is just take my thread, bump that right up against that putty, and now I really don't even have to worry about, sometimes when you're finishing a fly off, when it has the cone head, when you're finishing it off, material has a tendency to want to suck down into that vacancy right there. There's no vacancy anymore. That's one's just solid piece, and everything sits exactly how I want it. So it winds up finishing this fly off really clean. And like I said, it's an added bonus. You get a little bit of extra weight if you want a pattern that's really going to be heavy on the jig for you. A lot of folks will even dead drift streamers. Yeah, I'm against that, but I mean, some folks do it and it works great for them. It's just not the style that I prefer to do. I like moving the fly. I like being active with it, bringing the fish to me as opposed to going to the fish. So I definitely, and it's not that it's not effective. It's just, it's a style thing. I don't like to dead drift streamers, and I don't do it. But it will catch you a lot of fish for sure. But for me, if you're doing that, may as well just be nymphing, I guess. But it's not really streamer fishing, in my opinion. Streamer fishing is supposed to be active and bringing fish to the fly, as opposed to vice versa. Anyhow, that's just my 2 cents on that. So there you can see we have our back hook connected. Everything's sitting nice and clean how we want it. I'm just going to bring this forward, take that all the way almost up to the front, double over my wire, capture that in place on the front side, double this wire over, I'll capture that in place on my side, and then just bring everything through. Now we're going to make the skirt on this fly. Yeah, that'll work. I'm going to take just a piece of this and move this off to the side. And I'm going to measure this out. I want this going back into, probably covering up a little bit past the eye of that hook, the eye of my back hook. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to bust off just a little bit more right there, and then I'm going to tie this into place, just getting a nice clean cover on my side of this fly. I'm going to take this up to where I doubled my wire over. I got a little bit of extra sitting in there. I wonder if that'd work for a cover. Yeah, that might work. That might work. I'll keep it off to the side and take a look at it here in a minute. Then I'm going to take just another piece of woolly bugger marabou. I'm going to fill in the skirt on the opposite side. Get that there. Just bust that tip off. Trim that section. Measure that out against the side I already have tied in. Bring that on the opposite side. Go ahead and secure that into place. Clean that up with a few thread wraps. A couple longer ones here and there, not going to really do any harm. That's all going to get covered up. And then with a top cover, I want this bleeding right into about my halfway point on my overwing for the back section, or for the back hook. And then I'm just going to get that tied in nice and secure. Clean that up with some thread wraps. Work this up to the front. Ease my transition going up. It's not really going to matter a ton because of the body material that we're using, this UV puller. But if you were using like a you know, a chenille or something like that, you would want to ease that transition a little bit, as much as possible. But seeing that we're using this UV, that body's not going to be real apparent if there isn't a perfect taper on it. And usually, you know, with streamers, you get away with that stuff a lot more than you do dry flies or nymphs or anything. Your tapers are really important. You'll hear me harp on that a lot when I'm tying dries and nymphs. But same things before with the body. I got a few trapped right there. There we go. Same thing as before with the body. Get about 3 to 4 good wraps in there. Stretch that UV puller. And then bring that forward again, 3 to 4 wraps, stretch. And I'm going to leave this about 1/8 of an inch short, maybe two wraps is all that I'm going to leave in the front that's going to be bare before my cone head. Shorten that thread up just slightly. Work through this UV puller so I'm not trapping a bunch of material. Go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to peel all of those fibers back, make sure that my head is nice and clear, and then just make a few solid wraps. Just kind of preen everything back. You can see how all of those fibers are going back toward the tail on this. Everything's nice and clear for us. Now we're going to go back to our rubber legs. We're going to set these in. And we're going to go 1, 2, figure 8 over the top. Manipulate your legs to where they're sitting how you want them. And then 1, 2, pull down tight. Your legs are locked into place. And now I want to find a really solid piece of marabou here to use as an overwing. I want this to be really nice and bulky and running all the way back to my skirt cover back here. So I'm going to take a nice thick section, really webby materials. Oh, let me get that in the frame. Really webby materials, has good length to it and everything. I'm going to get those. I'm going to dust this back section off, and then I want to bust those tips to where it's nice and blunt. It's a nice heavy overwing. I want to measure that out, and like I said, I want it going back into my skirt section. So that's a nice length right there. And then I'm going to take and just clean those up just a little bit more. I'm going to get that captured and go right in front of where I tied in my rubber legs. I have everything nice and secure, nice and clean. You can see that overwing. It just gives a lot of nice bulk to this pattern. And if I pick up that skirt section there, it just has a nice clean transition all the way through. It gives a little bit of extra movement with that Marabou, and it really just adds a little bit to the fly. When I first tied this, I didn't have overwings at all on there. This is probably the ugliest looking fly that I ever tied when it first started, but tweaked a couple of things here and there, and it wound up turning out pretty decent. So now I want to build just a little bit of a collar and a throat. Before I go talking about doing that, I'm going to go ahead and get the actual throat portion in. I do this with the Tenet 2s, with the Octobers, the landing strips. I add a little bit of Senyo's red laser dub in here. I just like that throat section, that red throat. It really looks good. I really feel that it is a trigger point on the fly as well. So I'm just going to bring my thread down here. I'm going to double up this red, and I'm going to set that right underneath the overwing that I tied in. Give 2 wraps and then really pull down tight on that. And then what I want to do is just take this, and I'm just going to trim that back at an angle. You can see that nice throat that we have right there on that red. And now what I have for the overwings, I guess is what you could call this. It's really just a collar. It kind of fills out the front of the fly. I took some Scalp and Olive laser dub and some olive laser dub. I'm going to mix these two, and it's going to give me like an olive brown look, sort of. It's not quite the perfect color combination that I would want, but it's damn close. So I'm going to start with my top section. And I'm going to bring this around. I'm going right in front of my overwing. I'm going to set that in place. 1, 2, pull down tight. That's set in place. And then I'm going to take and do the same thing on the bottom side. Set that right on the bottom. Don't capture any of the stuff that's already tied in there. And then I just want a half hitch. I'm just going to let that set how it is for now. I always do that. Well, not always. It's a good habit to get into when you're tying in this laser dub, and especially like when you're wrapping it around when you're wrapping it around your thread, you're making that cup, and then you're pulling down tight. It's a good idea to half hitch, because if this thread backs up at all, this winds up getting loose, and then it'll just work itself right out. So it's a good habit to get into, to go ahead and just trim, or to go ahead and half hitch. That way your gel spun or whatever thread you're using, really, I mean, it's not going to back out on you, and you're not going to lose the material that you tied in. So now with this, I'm just following the angle of my cone, and I'm pushing that right through. It's not quite as clean of a cut as I would like. Like I said, I'm just pushing that right through, and you can see that makes a neat little collar right in front of that. It adds a little bit of bulk to the pattern itself without adding a ton of weight as well. So then I'm going to take a straw now and just capture everything, get it out of my way, and then I'm going to form a dubbing loop here. And grab my tool. Go ahead and half hitch once again. And the last thing that I'm going to do on this, or the last material that I'm going to add to this, is I'm going to take a little bit of olive brown ice dub just to fill in this slight gap that I have between the Conehead and the laser dub. It's not going to take a ton of this. If you want, you could do, you could just run this, you know, just twist this stuff on if you want. I think it looks a little better, and it fills the fly in, or it fills this gap a little bit better. If you do it in a dubbing loop, and it's pretty, I keep this pretty loose, I really do. I don't wrap this really heavy at all. You can see all the more that I'm using right here, or all the more that I'm twisting that up, I keep that loop pretty loose. If you do it by hand, it winds up just getting it. You can see the segmentation and everything throughout the fly, or throughout the ice dub head right next to the cone. So there we go. I just set that right like that. Bring it right up to the cone head. I got a little bit of extra material there, but that's not the end of the world. I'd rather have too much than not enough. And then I'm just going to make a couple of clean wraps right in front of that. I'm going to whip finish right to the cone head. 1, 2, get a third in there, and really sink that in to that tungsten. It's all going to disappear. That tungsten's forced back into that cone head. That cone head is locked in place, like it's not going anywhere. Now we're going to peel all of our material out from the straw, and then I'm going to go just slightly below the gold piece, probably lined up more so with that rubber band right there. I'm going to trim my legs. They're hanging down nice and straight for us. Everything's in place how we want it, and all of our legs are on the sides that we want it. There you can see a nice full pattern with a ton of flash in it. This is one that I really don't shy away from fishing, even on cloudy days. Even though this has a ton of flash in it, the colors to it, now I'll grab some more beads. The colors to it really don't, well, with this color combination, I should say, the colors to it kind of accept cloudy days, if that makes any sense. These ones do pretty well on cloudy days. What I'm trying to say, it's not to where it's going to have so much flash to it to where it's just going to be obnoxious or anything. And even on bright days as well, you know, typically olive's not going to be one of the first colors that you'll go to on a bright day, but this should be in the rotation for later on with that flash. Like I said, it's kind of a multi-purpose. It's good on cloudy and bright days. But we'll give this a quick rotation right through here. You can see that nice red throat that we have underneath. This, your Marabou overwings fill out this on the bulk a little bit. Really quick, simple pattern to tie, but pretty dang effective, especially you know, when I'm searching for some deeper water. It seems to be the one that I go to more so than anything. Typically, I'm not fishing a ton of deep water unless, like I said, hot summer day or winter. I'll try and work the bottom portions of the water a little bit more. But this is also versatile enough and light enough to where you can jerk strip this as well, even with the tungsten cone head. But there is the Conehead 10 at 2. If you guys have questions or comments, leave them with me. I got a shitload of beads to pick up now, so I'm going to cut the cameras off and we'll catch you guys next Wednesday.